Connected cloud should be all right. And you have a USB or?
Yes, HDMI.
Yes, in that case, I guess got to connect to here.
But I have
Where's? Yes, it's first time we see this. Yeah.
Technology.
Yes, technology. Oh, our topic is technology, right?
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah,
I think you got to
bring on some more technology.
That's the case. Ah. Is it a PowerPoint or something?
We have some PowerPoint and then we're going to do some remote desktop back row server.
Okay. I'm just wondering if I leave now, can it show?
We should just project our screen. We'll set it up.
Yeah, set
yeah,
up.
she just screen share really is what primarily after.
Nice to see you. How have I been? Oh, good. I think I've survived the still here. I tried Polytechnic again, actually, but they were adding in another specialisation to their thing.
They initially asked me to come along as well, but
yeah,
I wasn't needed. So.
Yeah, so I wondered if you can replace my check. Yeah, I assume he's
he was coming in.
So can we get this display? This powering this computer?
Yes. Can you? What we need to do. Well, there's another way to do it. Well, let me press this once, and then actually. Yes, got it.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Too easy.
Yeah,
So we got one screen.
So one screen, then with the. We need a PC, right? Let's see. Okay, let's see. PC on code, HTML. Oh, got it. Got it.
You just double tap the key.
Yeah, got it. Yes. Cool. So, looking here.
Happy with that? We go full screen after this is currently showing. It's just like left. Yeah.
Yes, hi everyone. So welcome to the ARA Construction Infrastructure Forum. And ARA Construction Infrastructure Forum is a fortnightly forum providing a kind of a platform for people from the industry movers, industry checkers to give us enlightening ideas. So I will give it to Lydia to introduce this week's guest speaker.
So hi everyone, here we are in our second infrastructure forum. Like we may have said a couple of weeks ago, we'll be trying to bring you one of these forums twice a month, every 2 weeks. So watch the notice boards and you'll see who the guest speakers are. Today we've got Barry Lynch and Owen from Logic Group. Welcome Barry and Owen. And they're going to talk to us about the QS role in advanced automated technology. Thank you. Give them a round.
Thanks, guys. Good afternoon. Just in case any of you have any problems understanding me, I'm Irish, so just tell me slow down. Somebody shout it out, because I do tend to speak a bit quickly. Owen is also Irish, but he can speak properly.
Sometimes.
So we're from Logic Group, and we're both quantity surveyors. I'm a director at Logic Group, and Owen is a senior quantity surveyor with us, and he's a BIM specialist as well. So Owen is going to kind of take you on a ride with some of the BIM that we actually do within Logic Group, and I'll kind of give some of the more general and automated technology stuff that we do. So if you want to just jump on the next one. So who we are, we're Logic Group, and we are property advisory, project management, cost consultancy, and facilities management. We're chartered quantity surveyors with the RICS, and we're fully registered as registered quantity surveyors with the NZIQS, and we're also members of the NZ Green Building Council. We were established in 2014 as Rise Projects, and it was just project management at the time. And then we rebranded in 2015 as Logic Group. In 2015, we also opened the Dunedin office and added the QS service to the project management. That's where I came into the company and started up that QS side of the business. In 2016, we added facilities management to that, which is the maintenance and running of the buildings after we built them. And in 2019, we added construction services, which is a new wing to what we do. So we don't just PQS these projects and project manage these projects anymore. We actually build some of them as well, operating as a main contractor. In 2020, we added a Wannock office, which opened up just before COVID, unfortunately. So some of the projects we're working on at the moment. Clearwater Quays. So this is out in Clearwater. It's high-end apartments. Building construction cost is about 8 million plus GST plus professional fees, consenting and all of that. It's a sustainable building, so it's built out of LVL and CLT, which is timber build construction basically, so there's no concrete other than the foundations. It's also high-end apartments, so these apartments are costing upwards of about 7.5 grand a square meter, just for the apartments. And it's backed by MPI, which is the Ministry for Primary Industry. So the use of timber sustainable products and products that are coming from New Zealand, MPI wanted to be involved with the project. So they're going to promote this project, and they're going to actually provide some of the funding towards it as well. Off the back of this project, the developer has decided to actually open his own CLT plant. This one is up in Rotorua. Again, it's CLT and LVL, $10 million project. And it's in 2 stages. So the first stage is a commercial building, which is the lower level one across here. That one is running at about 12, 13 million. And then there's what is on this render is a 5-story hotel, but it's now been projected up to 10 stories. So that's going to be one of the tallest LVL CLT buildings in New Zealand. That one isn't in construction yet. The Clearwater one is in construction. We've just finished foundations. And this one is at tender stage at the moment. So we're hoping to have a contractor on board and breaking ground in probably about 3-4 weeks. This one is in Christchurch. So it's a block of apartments, 10 million plus. It's 3 blocks of apartments, each one of them slightly different design. It's right in the CBD. It's building affordable and what was meant to be Airbnb apartments. So basically, the investors and the people who buy these apartments will have the flexibility to own these apartments as well as run an Airbnb above the actual building, above their own apartment. This one, our project managers are involved with. So this is down in Ashburton, and it's the demolition of an existing Ashburton Town Council building and reconstruction of a brand new library and civic centre. What's important about this one is that it's got IL4 ratings. So basically, in an earthquake, it can be open again within a week. It's also been built with, most of the building has been built with CLT and LVL as well. Ashburton Schools. So we do a lot of work with Ministry of Education. This is a group of schools down in Ashburton as well. It's 3 schools in total, and it's coming to 15 million for the entire project. They're going to be flexible learning environments in that they're going to be open plan like a lot of you guys are used to with the K-block. So they're going to do the same with the actual classrooms, have open plan classrooms, no walls, make them flexible so they will have movable walls, they will be able to enclose spaces afterwards. This one is currently going through preliminary design, and Owen is actually working on the models at the moment. Hayward College was completed about 2 years ago. It's down in Dunedin, and it was for Otago Polytech, or sorry, for the university down there. And this is one of the first ones Logic took on as a construction project. So we did all of the preliminary budgets on it and the project management through design. We weren't confident that we could get a contractor to complete this project. There was a huge amount of risk associated with it. There was a lot of asbestos on site, and it had to be completed from handover to the builder to delivery so students could move back in within 12 weeks. And you see it was a $13 million spend, so that's over $1.1 million a week was being spent on that project. It involved basically gutting the entire inside of that building and only leaving the external envelope and the floors. So we strengthened the building first, and then we went through and basically refurbished it, building new apartments right through it. It was handed over about 2 days early, and we actually got a bonus for handing it over early. Right, so the reason we're actually here is to talk to you about future QSing. So we believe that in the future, the quantity surveyor is going to have to be a hell of a lot more flexible than they've been in the last 30, 40 years. Quantity surveying has been kind of in a box of you're involved with cost and measurement. We're saying that going forward, you're going to have to be more flexible with what you do and how you do it. Clients want different things now, and we're starting to see clients ask for the quantity surveyors to do a bigger role than what they were traditionally doing. That has been pushed kind of by the fact that, and you guys who at the moment will be training as to how to build builds of quantities, schedules of quantities, and use ANZ SMM. We are working in this industry, and I've been working in New Zealand now for nearly 10 years. In that entire time, I've been able to do 2 equivalent ANZ SMM schedules of quantities. Clients don't pay for them anymore. They don't want them. They take, in their opinion, they take too much time. There's too much risk put with them, and they cost too much. So clients for the last 20 years have been using the schedule of quantities less and less and less and less in its format as a contract document. That's a big minus, or a big negative for the quantity surveying profession, because it takes a huge part of our role out. It also removes all of the tools that we have for actually controlling costs when it goes to contract. Even comparing tenders is difficult because each tender provides a contract in a different format and there's no schedule of quantities. So it makes our job a hell of a lot more difficult, and it means that we don't add the value that we should be adding as quantity surveyors. All because I guess the clients just don't want the time and the cost of actually producing that schedule of quantities. So there's a big drive towards a solution. And a lot of quantity surveyors, a lot of contractors are just, they're eking out an existence with producing a lot of risk-based pricing. BIM is the solution for that. And we're moving in the direction, the entire world is moving in the direction of more qualified and better BIM as a concept. But not a lot of people understand what BIM is, or how it even works, what's involved in it, what projects even use it. Does anybody know if there's a project in Christchurch that used BIM? No. So the Justice Precinct used BIM, but it used it only for services. So for their mechanical, electrical, their IT, their plumbing, their hydraulics, they used it for that, and they used it predominantly for coordinating the works and checking if there was any clashes with the existing design. That's all it was used for. And even at that, it wasn't used to its fullest extent. They had full-time BIM specialists on site. I think it was 3 to 4 of them on site at a massive cost for the entire project, and it never got fully utilized. The reason being is that there's no concise way of approaching BIM. The world is still grappling as to how to use it. In the future, they're talking about, you know, in the next couple of years, that BIM will be used on projects in a bit more of a holistic view. You're talking about projects that are $100 million plus. They can afford BIM. BIM really doesn't come into projects that are down in that 50 million, 20 million, 10 million. None of the projects we would have been working on should have BIM on them. So the drive was for us to go out there and find something that it allowed us a point of difference initially, that we were able to say that we were able to use BIM or some part of BIM. We went out and we met the industry experts in BIM, and they all were basically coming back with the same information. BIM Nirvana is fantastic. It's a great idea, but it doesn't work right now. What you need to do is you need to find the parts that do work for you, and you need to work for your client, and those are the parts you need to concentrate on. So Owen led up our BIM development and BIM investigation to see how we could actually utilize BIM and what parts actually worked. And Owen worked with an Australian software developer to actually develop a piece of software that does BIM measurement. So all of our budgets and all of our BIM are now done in, or all of our measurements and costings are now done in 3D in a 3D model. The design team don't provide us a 3D model, and they don't provide us any 3D information generally. What we will do is we will use our skills from the likes of Costix, which we have used in the past and still use, to carry out the same measures, but in a 3D environment, and a lot of it automated and efficiency brought into it. So at the moment, you guys will be using Costix or scratching across the surface of Costix in measurement. And what you do generally is you import the PDF or you import the DWG into your, or DXF into your Costix, and you trace the lines around what the architect is drawing. Often that's snappable. You can get your measures from that. And you will measure an item maybe once, and you will use that measure in multiple different measures by combining it with other parameters like height and volume and things like that. We're using those same skills. We're getting the architect's drawings, and we're now tracing over those with a 3D model. One is going to show you a couple of projects that we've been working on that show how you actually do this tracing over the architect's models or the architect's drawings and produce cost estimates from those 3D models.
So, the future, big topic. So as Barry said, look, it's the same format in its essence. Bring in a 2D plan and take a 3D model over it. I guess where this evolves and the reason it started was estimating for contractors, or if Logic Group was taking on a construction project ourselves. Even this building here, for which is the contractor I priced it for, is just won the tender. That would have been split over about 200 drawings between architectural and engineering. So obviously, I was looking for a better solution to bring all the data from them drawings into one location, and rather than having them split across hundreds of drawings effectively. So this is a bit of a different example, because what we did was bring in the IFC model. So we already have the concrete and steel work here shown.
So the IFC is a 3D model that the design team may have built. A lot of time they won't build any smart data into that. They will just give it to you as a 3D model, but it provides a framework for us to start.
So in this case, we would have had subcontractors price the concrete work and the steel work. So we did not need to quantify that. What we were interested in was the carpentry. So structural model here developed probably through Revit. We got the IFC, and what we needed to achieve was a schedule of quantities priced for a tender for the carpentry contractor. And just to show you how much carpentry is involved, it's pretty much the entire building. So
again, with the architect's drawings or with the structural engineer's drawings, when they produce their design element, they will only ever show you a typical cross-section of a detail. They will never draw everything. They will never identify everything. They will just say, here's a typical detail. And it's up to the quantity surveyor or to the contractor to figure out where that's applicable to. They may have to go to 20 drawings into the pack and then try and refer that back to a specific plan to understand where it all comes together. One has built all of this, drawn everything into a 3D model. And a lot of this is automated. He hasn't drawn every single element in here.
So, sorry, this is just running a little bit slow, but essentially we still got to go through 200 drawings. We still try not to print them out, save on trees, but we'll have our PDF viewer open, so they're not all loaded into Costix. We don't have to measure on each and every drawing. I'll read the information off the PDF and I'll build it into the model. As Barry says, it's automated. So for instance, all that roofing would have just been do an outline of the four corners of the building, just tell the system what pitch of roof it was going to be, what the framing buildup was going to be, and hit generate. From that, then I can hit takeoff if I've already included a supply rate for the type of timber that's involved. In this case, they're all the yellow there, 300 by 63 LVL.
So every single piece of material, and this is not just carpentry works, it can be used for jib, it can be used for insulation, building papers, cladding systems, everything that goes into a building will be in here, but it's all identifiable. So if you go and you look at an individual member, it tells you exactly what it is. You don't have to refer back to the original drawings of the architect's drawings to try and figure out what a specific piece of timber is.
I might just, sorry for the interruption, but just for the benefit of you guys, it might be wise if I just flip over onto the Wi-Fi. Would that be our guest? Just so the models run a little bit faster, because I feel like there might be a bit of a lag.
Which Wi-Fi?
interruption, guys, but
So a bit like Costex, as I was saying, you're tracing over the drawings. And in Costex, generally what you do is you will often go and do a lot of your measures first and then go back and insert that into the schedule of quantities, probably with some phraseology book, or even write the descriptions of the item yourself. We do this backwards. We actually tell, before we start drawing and tracing over the architect's drawings, we tell it exactly what it is in composite. So if we're drawing a timber frame wall, we won't tell it that it's just a timber frame wall. Before we start drawing, we'll identify the fact that it's a 140 by 45 mil wall with studs at 600 mil centers. We'll identify that it's got Bradford's insulation in it. We'll identify that it's got a certain type of building paper on it. It's got a certain type of jib on the inside, a certain type of cladding on the outside, a certain type of batten. And then we will draw that wall. So we don't measure any of it. We just draw. We know that the bottom plate starts here and it ends here. We draw that wall and it'll actually build that entire wall with everything we've described that wall to be. So when we do a takeoff, then it spits out the quantities for every single element within that wall.
The couple of minutes we lost here, we should actually make back by able to navigate through those models a bit faster, I think. So I think it's worth the interruption. So what we'll do is, as well as that, there's an added benefit to constructability. So what we'll often, a big part of what BIM is at the moment is it's a designer using a 3D software and it's an architect using the 3D software, so Revit and Tekla or ArchiCAD, and running a clash detection. So usually it's just used as a design coordination, but really when you build it into a model such as this, it's a virtual construction. So that's why it's called VDC, virtual design and construction. So we'll find issues that even has made it through BIM coordination sessions between the architects and engineers. We'll find problems where the geometry just won't allow for something to be built. So we're pricing out variations or identifying variations if it is a competitive tender.
Just a few examples of that we've identified. And again, we've identified a few clashes on drawings that are completely slipped through the design team and gone right through building consent and are ready to be built on site. Materials are ready to be ordered. One of the big ones we found recently on the Clearwater Apartments was the architect had designed an entry lobby and large glass doors, which were best part of about 30–40K for these windows. And when we built our model, we realized that the actual glass wouldn't fit under the beam that the structural engineer had designed. So that would have been potentially ordered and sent to site, and then found that it actually wouldn't fit because it had gone through all of the design coordination, it had gone through all the clash detection, and would have simply gone to order.
And I'll always enter in windows and doors. And the reason for that is, as a quantity surveyor, I don't necessarily always need to. But for instance, here we would have, I'm not a designer, I'm not a modeler, I'm a quantity surveyor. I was interested in taking drawings and taking a measure. I wanted to know how much cedar cladding we had. I needed to take a deduction, so I've added a window, and that will deduct the quantity of cedar quantity of generated there. Similarly, inside,
it won't just deduct the quantity on the cedar. It deducts the quantity of the insulation, the deduction of the quantity of building paper, cladding systems, jib board, insulation, and adds in quantities for all your architraves. So just by putting in the window.
So it's worth putting in the window, but what that also allows you to do is find if the window actually fits, if you're reading that off a window schedule. In terms of framing, adding in that window is going to automatically put in for our headers and for additional studs. The red there indicates load transfer. This house here, we've just finished and we've priced just about all the structure, internal finishes and claddings in the system itself. So if we hit takeoff on the system.
By doing it this way, so we've often explained that the QS's work is always undervalued, as in not the way we price, but from a client's perspective, from a design team's perspective, the QS basically produces a written document, and nobody, from our experience in the industry, clients don't want to read the schedule of quantities. The architect doesn't want to read the schedule of quantities. It's a completely different way of communicating from the way they communicate. They communicate in drawings. So if we can communicate in a model, just like the architect and the engineer, you can discuss your assumptions, you can discuss any clashes, you can discuss even your quantities and what you've taken for in the building with the design team, with the client in a communicative way that they actually understand in a language that they design in themselves.
So on Costex, you might be familiar that if you have a rate that is in green, or sorry, a quantity that is in green, you can click to show the quantity. Similarly, in this, on the schedule, you can click and it will bring you in here and it will show up. It was meant to show up a wall, but it would show you exactly where that particular quantity came from. So you can just in the same fashion reference everything back to the model. So I think
this is one of the schools we're working on at the moment down in Ashburton. Ministry of Education. The model is parametric. So if we make a change to the model by stretching it out, by adding other windows and doors, automatically updates the cost. We don't have to go back and reprice for it or swap out the quantity. The pricing just automatically updates.
so for instance, we just have a floor plan here. So what we've done is we've said that the wall is 2.65 high, window headers are 2.2. The type of wall framing can be selected. So this is a split wall with brickwork in the lower half and a trespa panel above. We're going to, so effectively, if Barry at the very beginning mentioned in Costex, you're going to take a quantity, you'll take your measure of a wall, let's say, and you will use that and create multiple calculations to get various different quantities. In this scenario, what we'll do is we'll actually decide on that information first. So we'll say what type of timber it's going to be, what type of stud spacings it will be, whether they'll be battens, what type of timber they'll be, what the cladding type will be, what the internal finishes are. So the fact that we've just gone quickly down through that, picked everything that we feel that will, the quantities, because we are reading this off the drawings, architectural specs, so we're just feeding that information into our selection. And then in the same fashion as using a 2D system, it's just 2 clicks. But the difference here will be that quantification of all the materials is already done, and if we have already entered the pricing for the materials, that's already done. So whereas in Costex you've measured your line, now you begin to create calculations, and you might have multiplied the length by the height to get the wall, but then you got to create extra calculations to take out your window. In this scenario, everything is done. You don't even necessarily need to go and start estimating it. The pricing element is done. So I mean, straight away you're at least 3 times faster than traditional system. You know,
so you guys are doing basic measures at the moment. Is there anybody working in the industry at the moment as a quantity surveyor? Okay, so how long do you think it would take to measure, we say, measure and price a 100 square meter house? Guesses? Traditionally, using Costex, it would probably take 2, maybe 3 days. Well, you've got a video there of you pricing of the house.
okay.
Just bear with us, guys, because this is about maybe 8-9 minutes long. I think it was it.
Yeah. So I just drew a few lines on the page just very quickly. So it's not a real house, it's not real design, but I kind of just made it up. So I guess I was designing a house in 7 minutes as well. I was just making something up just to show someone how quick we could probably generate off at least a carpentry take off in price for them. We're supposed to be sound, but we have an issue with getting that through.
You're only missing music in here. So as you can see, the construction of the walls is already done. Now the foundation is done. Ceilings.
this case, we just wanted to put in a truss roof. So thinking pre-nail items such as a typical residential construction, just about all of this, all the timber work in this house in terms of the main wall framing and the roof is just going to be pre-nail wall framing, pre-nail prefabricated trusses. But as I say, this developed from originally pricing for contractors or for ourselves. So we needed to know the exact cost of sticks and bricks and nuts and bolts. But we've now become so efficient at it that we are using it for cost planning. So instead of where someone might give you an elemental one-page cost plan for a commercial building, we can give you a full QS model. We might take 2 or 3 hours longer because we're developing so many assumptions, but we can give you a full construction model. But things like the pre-nail trusses, we know from previous construction projects that we've done, we kind of know roughly how much per linear meter of framing it will work out, so we can still apply rates and don't get it with a tolerance of 1 or 2% of what placemakers or carters or someone might provide us that frame and truss for.
We often use this as well, even at concept design stage or feasibility. If any of you have seen feasibility drawings from an architect, generally all they tend to be is a hand-drawn sketch and maybe some nice colored blocks, squares, to show you what the rooms might look like. And we'll employ this to basically build a building around that, give that to the client in 3D model and say, listen, look, we don't know what your architect was envisaging 100%, but here's a 3D model of what you can actually potentially afford. So they get an understanding of what their budget will actually get them.
Obviously, with those high-level cost plans, there is a number of assumptions, and generally everything is based on assumption and our own industry knowledge. So we'll, historically, we've produced quite a large written report that will go through that, and it will explain structural steel, what we presume might happen, what we've allowed for. In many cases, it's really up in the air because without seeing the building in some sort of visual effect like this, it's very hard to determine, and we might just use a square meter rate from a previous similar building. If we don't have a similar building, it might come from some benchmarking data, but does the new building align with where that derived from? So there could be quite a large difference in structure. With this, the assumptions are in 3D. So clients tend not to read the reports very well. And when we do go from concept to preliminary design and there's cost changes, I guess there's a lot of questions around why has the steel allowance moved from this to maybe a higher value or a lower value. So really, we can just refer very quickly back to a 3D model and said, when we based a cost on steel, it was because we presumed, as you can see on a model, this much was required. Similarly,
basically, it's a communication tool as well as just producing a 3D model. It looks great, it looks fantastic, but the client will suddenly conceive a building in 3D and understand what has been allowed for. Rather than trying to read the schedule of quantities and trying to understand what all of that QS jargon actually means, they can now just look at the 3D model and see exactly what our assumptions were. They can look at the 3D model and understand what the room proportions are going to be in 3D. Because that concept design, an architect and an engineer will very, very rarely produce a 3D model. They produce a floor plan, probably sketched.
If you had a slightly small,
yep, absolutely, yeah. And if they provided us with the model, we can hit the takeoff button and provide an estimate. Yeah, most definitely. That would be a really efficient system.
And this is what we were talking about earlier on about being flexible. And this isn't traditionally what a QS does. They don't produce 3D models. They don't produce drawings. And this is what we're saying about being flexible, is that clients are wanting more technology. They're wanting their QSs to be better communicators. And being bluntly honest, the quantity surveying profession has actually been traditionally for communicating their estimates, communicating their assumptions, communicating their provision sums and the contingencies. Here is a way of communicating it where the client understands it, the architect understands it. And if there's any questions after, you don't have to go trawling through a full schedule of quantities looking for it. You can actually just bring up the model and point it out to the client.
And there's nothing here that a QS wouldn't have had to do anyway. It's just, it looks a bit different, but you would have had to get a set of plans and you would have had to trace over every line that you can see me tracing over there. I might have clicked twice to create a door, but you'd have to use the count tool to count the door at least. It's exactly the same amount of work to take the initial 2D measures, but here's the result.
so you own the model then, what was taking then loads of arguments as to when you've got
Well, it's not issued as a design document. I guess our schedule and output and report in this normal fashion.
We're not trying to be a design team, and this is what we said to our clients is that look, we've got an architect, we've got an engineer. What we're trying to do is communicate our budget. So we're telling you exactly what budget is. Your builder is not expected to build off this, but that said, we're using this in Clearwater where we're operating as a contractor, and we produced a model to such accuracy with all of the clashes and all of the variations already removed because we've gone through with that level of accuracy, right down to the very last, the big screws that go into the CLT, they're called SPAC screws. We've drawn and measured every single one of those as well. So we can actually produce that and give that to the construction manager on site. And he actually has an iPad out on site that he'll sit down with our model and he'll discuss it with his carpenters on site and he'll discuss it with his foundation contractors by bringing up the model and showing them the specific detail and telling them how he wants it done based off our model.
As well as that, so this could have been maybe a sketch that were provided for concept design. So we've done a quick price by grabbing the quantities and applying a rate. But the level of data we have here, I could actually send a schedule, an order list to a merchant that has efficiently worked out all the lengths of studs, top plates, headers to the most efficient purchase length. So if it's 2.8, it might round it up to 3 meters, and we want 15 of those. You can, once those packs of timber arrive on site, there's another list I can print out from this model that will give us a cutting list. So it will then tell a carpenter to go and cut 15 of those 3 meter lengths to 2.8. So effectively, we're cutting down on wastage.
I want to show in good detail there. How many times you picked up a set of drawings, or you will pick up a set of drawings that doesn't have a cross section in the building where you actually need it to measure? With this, you can actually produce a cross section anywhere in what you build, in any direction, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and get the detail you want. That building is finished. It's measured and it's priced. And that took about 15 months. Where it would normally take about 3 days. We're not CAD technicians. I've never done a CAD course, so I can do this because so much of it is already automated. It's not about being able to draw. What it's about is having the experience to know how something is built. So because you can and how to read drawings. If you can gain experience on methodologies and how to build by being on site as much as you possibly can, seeing it being built, you will then get to the level where you can actually produce this. Yep. So we have effectively with Clearwater, we are the contractor, we were ECI. So we brought in our construction manager and worked through all these methodologies with him. We've worked on other projects down in Queenstown where we brought in the contractor, sat down with them, where specifically there was a hotel we were building down in, involved with down in Queenstown, where the architect had drawn these lovely architectural thin kind of louvers around the building. But neither him nor the structural engineer had said how it was going to be built, what the framing behind it looked like. It was just left to the builder to understand how to do it and to price it. So we were actually able to sit down with the carpentry trade for that project and understand from them how they would build that, draw that, and then send that to the architect and structural engineer, which they then just approved it. They said, look, the builder is happy with that and it'll work. We're happy to sign off.
So I guess a couple of things on this would be probably, I know I've just shown how we've drawn 2 walls, but essentially a lot of that framing does look like it takes a lot of time. So I'll just show you a quick example, and this is one of our buildings down in Woolston, Tauranga, which we've just been looking at in terms of.
That's why we do the site survey at Woolston. The old brick building.
For the 3D modeling, plus spec.
So it's a SketchUp extension, but we use multiple extensions in our workflow based on SketchUp. So that roof, really just to give you a very quick idea. So that outline has just been traced off the top of the walls. In some cases, we can just click walls and say trace line and create a pane on the top of the roof.
That's the measure you do for the GFA.
And really, we're just like, right, well, we want to quantify all the roof tiles. We want to quantify the ridge capping. We want to quantify the gutters, the fascia, absolutely anything you can think that's associated with that roof cladding system. So obviously we need to work out what the pitch is and apply the ratios on top of the quantities and calculations. Take several measures to make that happen, or we can just do that and that's the BOQ done.
So that's taken off all the timber framing, as all the same. So that's taken off all the roof coverings. That's taken off all the flashings, your valleys, your gutters, your fascia details, pretty much the roof.
Of course, if our assumptions are wrong and we've assumed the wrong thickness of fascia, or we've assumed the wrong gutter or the wrong roof cladding, we can just right click and change that at any time. So it's full. A good thing to note is that it's full parametric modeling. So anything can be changed. If we put a wall in the wrong place, we don't delete and redraw. We never remeasure. We can just edit and change to what it needs to be, or we just push the wall to where it needs to be.
That's
So
what we were talking about in relation to being parametric. So if we change something, we don't cut the entire model. All those elements are connected to each other, so they all manipulate around to accommodate that change.
So really, we can do these at concept or preliminary design stage, and then we just update the model as the new information comes in, which is a good saving for us really in terms of how much work we put in. So that's just generated that frame off that roof. And again, I'll have all the rates, the labor constants, the fixing rates associated with roof trusses at 90 by 45. So again, it's just a right click and take off and extract that information. So that would just be a few examples of those. Do you want to move to Cromwell?
Yeah, so Cromwell, this is an example of what we were saying earlier on about a concept design. This is what was provided to us, and we were asked how much will this cost. So feasibility, they're trying to understand how much will their building cost. They haven't made the decision to build this yet, and this is all the information they have about the building.
It took us longer to work out what that was, that roof detail, than it was to actually put a cost on it. But once we figured it out, we very quickly, well, we actually did the steel afterwards. So we looked at what the framing would be. And once we understood the structure and how the water management would work, we went back and said, okay, well, that roof will have to finish here. So therefore we'll probably need some steel here. So when we make our assumptions, that's an assumption. Before we would have wrote that in a report, it was hard to understand. But now they say you've $30,000 worth of steel in there. How have you come to that conclusion? We said, well, to make the building stand up as much as we could reasonably practically assume. And again, that's just a list of our assumptions.
So if there's any of you guys have good financial aid, you probably should go.
So one of the other technologies that we use is drone surveying. Again, not traditionally done by the quantity surveyor, but a very early stage design. You're often not going to have site levels, understand what the topography of the actual land is that you're developing on. And a lot of QSs will just exclude it from their assessment and say that it's excluded and it's a risk item. What we'll do is we'll go out to site and we'll actually send up a drone. And the drone will fly over the site. So here's a 3D model of the Clearwater site just before COVID. And we did a 3D model. So if you click the here. So the drone will go up and it can actually, from the drone, we can actually do either spot point levels, or we can even do a full contour map of the site using the drone to an accuracy of 2%. So that's perfect. That's even more than you'd ever need a feasibility. Could even do a detailed design. But we're not trying to replace the building surveyor or the land surveyor. What we're trying to do is just build accuracy into our budgets by giving the client a proper site cut. So you can see, basically, we've exported those contours out of drone software, and we've imported it into our BIM software, which is done the contour map. The drone. So the drone actually can take levels, like LiDAR. It's got a technology in it that will actually project onto the ground and understand what the contouring of the site is. It's a DJI. Yep. So like the likes of your DJI Mavic will do this. So that's just the drone. You have to have the software to go with it that will do all the contouring and all that.
So with Civil's cut and fill software, we could just enter points and get that kind of output. That was the output on the Clearwater for cut and fill.
So the drone survey is useful for more than just doing contouring and site cut and fills. We actually use it as well for, if you go back to the map, here. the older map. Yeah, absolutely. So we can do cut and fold. So you'll see here where we've drawn blue lines, which drawn these for examples. We can actually put in our finished floor level, and it will tell us how much has to come out of that blue area just to bring it down to floor level or underside of floor level. The other elements you're seeing there is what photos the surveyor or the drone has actually taken. So we can click on any one of those and it'll give us an angle on the site once we click on any one of those photos. So if we need to see something in detail, we'll a lot of the problems we have as quantity surveyors is time to get out to site, trying to get out there and record as much information as possible, as accurate as possible when there is no drawings, which in this instance they wouldn't have been at this point. So it's generally with sites like this or complicated sites, the drone is perfect because we can actually go up, if you go back to the map one, we can go to site and we can actually just send the drone up and we can actually record notes. So click on the green one there on. It'll give us some note that we made on site. So that was a spot level that we put in the middle of the site. These yellow dots was counting off how many trees on site needed to actually come out. So, like again, you might have spent 10 minutes on site trying to record how many trees there were, what height they were. We can measure all of that now from the drone survey. We don't need to record it on site. We can just send the drone up for 10 minutes, finish it up, bring it back to site, upload the software, and then just pull off all the site access issues, any trees that don't need to come out, any cut and fill that needs to be done for feasibility stage, things like that.
So how long do you run
Well, with the drone is automated.
Yeah.
So that is effectively a robot. What we do is we go to site and we give it the site boundary of what we want it to record. It'll go up and it'll do everything. So you don't have to fly it. It just goes straight up. It'll go over the site in a grid. It'll take all the photos it needs. It meshes all of those back into a map. And when you upload it to software, you just get that information straight over.
Embrace it and become experts in it, really, and don't fall behind.
This is what we're saying. This is the flexibility of learning new skills that improves the value of the quantity surveyor, because clients don't want to spend all that money on a quantity surveyor, and they haven't done for 20 years. So we're struggling continually to get clients to engage on full service. The best way to actually do this is to advance with technology. Construction has been very, very slow to adopt technology. And what we're trying to do is push the boundaries so that clients will engage us to do more so we can do our jobs better. We can get more information.
The lines between them are just definitely having more construction.
This is what I'm saying. We have to be more flexible. As a profession, we just need to be more flexible, or else our qualification is just going to be eroded to nothing.
I just wondered, is there some of being professional?
Is there a BIM professional? Yeah. Owen is our BIM specialist.
Right.
He's not qualified in BIM specifically. If you go back 5 years ago, to get a qualification in BIM, you'd have to go back to the UK. So there's not much out there to actually do.
I just wonder how we separate the role in the BIM profession.
What we're saying is that the QS should be the BIM specialist, right? Because you go back and you look at, just to provide a very holistic example, go back 20 years ago when the QS produced the schedule of quantities. They took every single source of information on that project and they brought it all back to one location, the schedule of quantities. So you got the structural, you got the architectural, you got the electrical, you got the hydraulic, brought it all back to one place. They collaborated into one document, the bill of quantities, the schedule of quantities. No other profession did that. So you're already, 20 years ago, we were the collaboration expert. We were the one who did the audit of the design, which we no longer get to do. We were the one who collaborated all of those designs in together and found errors in the drawings, found missing information, found missing details, and went and asked for that information and resolved that issue so that we could complete our schedule of quantities and that contractors could produce a de-risked project. That's all gone now. So what we're saying is that QSs are primed to be the BIM specialist. So this is an example of how we do it on site. I don't want to spend too much time because we run out of time, won't be time for questions, but this is another piece of software we use. It's called a Matterport, point cloud mapping. So this is for the inside of a building, and it's one of the big issues that we've always had as quantity surveyors working with existing buildings, trying to understand how, you go into a building, you get a set of drawings from an architect. The architect hasn't drawn, the kitchen's in the way. He hasn't drawn that there's a socket on that wall. He hasn't drawn that, he might have got the wall in the wrong place. It's an existing building. they're very hard to actually get quality information out of it when you're doing refurbishments. So what we do now is we send in a Matterport 3D camera, and it will identify every single room. It'll, if you zoom back out a small bit, you can see it's done ground floor and first floor, and all if you go up to the floor selection. So that's the ground floor, first floor, and all if you go into the model. We can, just like Google Earth, we can now walk around the building, and rather than taking hundreds of photos of this building as a quantity surveyor during feasibility stage, which is what we traditionally would have done, we would have gone in and we would have taken a photo, sat in that corner of the room, taken a photo to the other side of the room, gone to another corner and taken it back into the other corner until you had all the information in the room. And then you'd have to go back to your computer, upload all those photos, and try and piece that back together into a room and try and extract the information for it. And the problem was that there was always something in the way. There was always a photo you missed. There was always something that wasn't properly viewable in those photos. With this, we can just walk around the room now, just as if we were there. So we can pick out everything exactly as to where it is. This is accurate again to 2%. So if we decide we want to take a measure, or if you click measure tool, you can basically get the height of the ceiling by clicking on the corner of the ceiling, or the door is always done, and to the bottom. Can we do what? Yeah, I'd say you probably yeah. You could do. I mean, you could draw using your axis. You draw a straight line and then check that against the actual plumbus of the wall.
What we found is we've so actually only a couple of weeks ago, Barry built a 3D model. So he's brought in the point cloud into SketchUp and built a construction model over it, so we could play around with it, because the client wanted to understand how much would it cost to build an extension out the back or increase the size of the upper floor.
So they want 4 different options priced on this one.
Of course, those new walls are plumb. We do overlay the existing as well, and you'll see that there's a difference between the existing and the new wall if they are out of plumb. So essentially, if you are going to be bringing it to construction, you would be completing that process, and therefore the answer is yes.
We had to put in portal frames, and with those portal frames at the back of the building for the strength. When we imported them, and everything was calibrated so that the buildings were perfect in dimensions to each other, when we imported a part of our portal frame disappeared into a wall, which straight away told us, well, I guess we had a plumbness issue. Anybody got any questions about this? To use that Matterport? BIM is, yeah, you want to go out and get industry experience. There's, I think, TAG or Polytech are starting to, they're putting in a module for their quantity surveying course. It's probably something I will probably look at all again as well. It's
yeah,
in the future.
we have the BIM program as well. And well, after this talk, actually, basically, I'm quite interested in BIM, all the software in our program. So we've got to see. We'll see.
Because this is a different approach. BIM usually, as far as QS is concerned, would be using something like Costex with a 3D upgrade to take Revit models from architects and engineers or combined federated IFC models and extract data from their models. But as we said, they don't go into the same level of detail. So this is a different approach where we're also creating construction models to a higher level of detail, and also to carry out constructability assessments. So it's a bit of a different approach. So look into VDC as well as BIM. It's just another branch of the same thing, I suppose.
One of the other things we can do with the drone and with the, similar to the Matterport point clouding, is we can actually import our VDC BIM model into the site. So you can actually level it on site within your cut and flow, so that the client can actually see what their building looks like on the actual map of the site, which is just get a communication tool and a little bit of just a gimmick, but clients like it.
Communication's good.
The last thing we wanted to very quickly talk to you about was, I come from a contractor's background. I spent 10, 12 years with major contractors back in Europe. And one of the biggest issues is always cost control. As a contractor's QS, trying to control the costs on your site. And generally that happened monthly or on an interim basis of when you produced your progress account and you paid all your bills. You then got a snapshot of what your profit and loss was for the project. But it was always a kind of, slightly out of kilter, slightly you had to adjust it for any risk, you had to adjust it for unknown invoices that you might not have yet, or that might have gone to your head office that you haven't seen yet, things like that. So when we started doing our own construction projects 2 years ago, we started looking at how we could actually manage that a bit better and be able to give minute by minute profit and loss accounts. So we started looking at different software out there, and we found a company that we've worked with in the past back in Ireland that actually have produced an incredible way of tracking the costs on your project. And I'll give you a quick rundown of it.
Yeah, sure thing. So again, look, it worked for pre-contract. So we looked at post-contract, what's out there to make the process more efficient. And obviously, at the moment, previously I'd done it on another project where we were taking in hundreds and hundreds of invoices a month, and I was loading them into a spreadsheet manually on Excel and allocating them to a phase of the project and against the BOQ so we could track how it was working. And this was taking an incredible amount of time, and invoices would be referenced, but we wouldn't really get to see any of the content. And another role for myself would have been to review every item on the invoice. If it was a merchant supplier invoice, I'd have to check the rates, and you'd have to get familiar with a lot of rates really to do that efficiently. Again, as Barry said, you're blind for 30 days because you have no idea where the project, how your spending is going until the end of the month. And there's the difference. Your spending is when you place a purchase. It's not when you pay the bill. There's a difference between spending and payments. So really, and also often a monthly meeting might be on the 25th, and you don't know how much has been spent probably until the 2nd or 3rd of the following month, until you've got all the invoices in, reconciled them, and produced a report. And people want live information. So really, to make what you need to do and make it work is you need to log what you've spent when you've spent it. And that is a purchase order system. Big contractors use it. Some medium-sized contractors use it. Many medium-sized contractors don't, and almost very few smaller contractors, which is what most are really, especially in New Zealand, do. So really, they're not even knowing if they're making money on a job or losing money on a job.
We work with contractors that are doing 10 million plus projects. At the end of the project, they don't know whether they make money or not. All they know is that they've got money in their account, so it must have gone well.
And even if you did know, at least you had 5 jobs, this one lost money, this one won money, you knew that level of information, that would be something. But in many cases, it's just, is your bank account in the black or is it in the red? Even if you did at least allocate invoices as they came into a project, that's good, but you lost money. Where did you lose it? Did you lose on concrete? Did you lose on the carpentry? Maybe you were actually make money on the carpentry. If you knew that, you could go lower on the next job and be more competitive. Also, you'd fix where you lost money on the concrete, so you wouldn't have that risk going into the next one. So there's a lot of extra elements. You have all that data. Invoices are flowing through your company, and you're not getting any value from it whatsoever. You're simply getting invoices to pay them. If you log a purchase order at a time, of purchase, of course. For instance, you got a guy on site. That person wants to order just a small amount of materials here. Let's say some jib wall board, various types, and a small amount of framing. If they can log that purchase order, which they would, so this is LifeCost is set up with an app as well as on desktop, so someone can get out their phone, as they can either put the order through to placemakers in this instance from their phone with those line items, or they can just simply phone up, make the order. They'll obviously quote the value of it on the phone, then they just tap in what that purchase value was on the phone. That will log it. Now we have a recorded cost. That's a recorded expenditure. This plays into how the whole invoicing management works, but really now we have live information. So if I was to look at a project, for instance, and we'll just look at this demo. See, we have a green and an orange, so it's a traffic light system. So just here for structure, the small values, but we are using this on $10, $20 million projects. But for instance here, the green is something that we always know. We can report that at any time, but it's not until the end of the month or the start of the following month that we ever understand the orange. So that's the invoices we haven't seen yet. People have been ordering materials, raising variations on site. They're all going to come in at some point, but we're completely blind to that. But now if you raise that cost as a purchase order, at any moment, at any time, we can say we've spent this much on the project. What that also allows you to do is some pretty cool stuff. Now that we've raised the purchase order and we said, yeah, it's going to be the demonstration project, it's going to be the carpentry trade first fix, and it's a material cost, and it's going to come from this supplier. So this day and age, it's an app, it's just some drop downs, and we log the price. It takes 2 seconds, it takes the same amount of time. to do that as it does to place the order. But where it saves you is when the invoice comes in. So you generally will be emailed an invoice. So let's say we've just sent this through. I flipped that forward into my live cost system and it's popped in here in my inbox. Now what will happen, I won't open up the invoice as a PDF in here. What it's done is it's actually scanned the invoice for two reasons. First, it's going to read every single line item and it's going to display this invoice to me now as a web page. As well as that, it's gone and located the purchase order number that I've given the supplier or the subcontractor, so it knows where to put itself. So now it's gone, right, cool, we're getting an invoice here for only $882.19 plus GST, and it will go, well, I need to go to the demo project and I need to go to this phase, which is carpentry first fix, and I'm a material cost. So it's gone and it's put it there. There's no manual entry from a QS to do that.
So the second it comes to your inbox email, it goes straight to the system. You send it straight to the system. It reads the invoice. It knows what project to put it on. It knows what the material was. And it records the cost against your project. It doesn't just do it for materials. It'll do it for labour as well. So your guys on site have an app where they're recording all of the labour to specific projects and what they're working on, what part of the project. That will automatically upload to the system at the end of every day, and you'll have a minute-by-minute profit and loss account for your project based on your labour and all your received costs. If you order something and it only comes as a part delivery or something's damaged, the guy who's receiving those materials with the app can actually note that. It then flags on this system so that you can actually partially pay that invoice or not pay that invoice at all on the basis that it hasn't been fully delivered. So it's, again, recording the fact that there's a cost there, but not to release the actual payment of the invoice because it's partial delivered.
So what we've seen here is I've forwarded this one in an email and it's opened up as a web page effectively. It's coming from Placemakers. It says, we believe that this invoice should go to demo project carpentry first fix. Are you happy with everything? Are you happy that the scan went through okay? Which we are. So we'll say convert to invoice. So this has now become, so just by forwarding it in, I haven't done anything. I've done any manual entry. It's put it in the correct place. Now it's actually not been delivered, so I probably shouldn't pay it. But you know, that's someone who can just be an office admin who doesn't need to now know what's happening on site. They just need to know that someone's ticked it as ordered, someone's ticked it as delivered. When it comes to them, all they need to do is make sure that these details are correct, which they obviously are. And they would also need what you usually would do, and I do as quantity surveyor, is I would check the line items for the rates. So that's another thing that this system will do. So again, the person doesn't need to know anything about rates because this will check every single rate. So for instance, we have an agreed rate with Placemakers for a sheet of 13 mil standard tube wallboard of $27.01. If for some reason they give us the wrong rate and it was $27.34, it's going to come up as red. And we're going to identify that. No, that is not correct. And really, you will know these rates anyway yourself quite well. Where this really works is some one-off items. You might not know how much a sump costs, and they're charging you $600 for something that costs $200.
So the great thing about this is that you can actually audit, you know, in a huge amount of detail the costs that are coming in. Whereas previously a QS might get an invoice, and these invoices from Placemakers come on, and they might have 500-600 items on it. QS doesn't have time to review every single price for every single one of those. What you're trying to do is you might do one audit maybe every couple of months to make sure that you're getting charged the right rates. This straight away flags it, and you can actually hold that invoice and we're not paying that because you're overcharging us. What it also does is it compares it against previous invoices. So if pricing is going up, straight away flags to you that there's an issue here that your pricing is going up. So if you're pricing the project at that time, you can actually already incorporate that information into your pricing.
One of my clients.
Can you relate this to program? To the program?
Yes.
So you might have cash flow for the program, and you might like tracking it at the same time.
Yeah.
You can preload your budgets in there and the duration of the contract, and it can actually tell you if you're going over budget on any particular element at any particular time on any particular month. The other thing it does is it integrates with Xero. So if your QS on site has the software and they're authorizing invoices, it automatically goes to Xero without any. Once they've authorized it, it goes to Xero, and then your administration person in your office knows that it's been fully checked and it's okay.
So what's happened here is it's been ordered, it's been delivered, it's checked itself, it's been approved. When I hit approve, that will just, there'll be another option come up. Do you want to open in zero? Zero will open up in live costs and we can pay the bill straight away. The person who actually carried out that task doesn't need to know anything about the job, let alone the cost of materials or what the product even is.
Because you can see the level of checking the gas control and flagging. One of the fantastic tools about this system for quantity surveyor is it back costs every single project into a catalog of products.
And just as I'm going through it here, this is one phase in a project substructure, and it will be able to tell me what's been logged as labor, which might come in from just timesheets, material from placemakers, subcontractors, plant machinery, and others. So really, it's taking that estimate that you've probably done quite fast in 3D and bringing it in here. And now your effort to manage those costs is pretty seamless. And again, as you say, if the client rings up and wants to know an up-to-date cost report, it's not like give me half a day, I'll put something together. It's give me a quick call and I can tell you over the phone exactly what I see on the screen in front of me, and that's your cost update.
So when an invoice comes in from placemakers, it can automatically read every single product on that invoice and put that data into a catalog. So it knows it's meant for 45 mil timber, it'll throw it into the number.
It'll identify the items that aren't already logged.
So when you're pricing your next project, you don't need to go back to placemakers and ask them to quote, especially if you're working really quickly. You don't have to 3 weeks for them to actually produce a quote. You can get your own catalog, which is their information, and it'll be valid to the last project you've done. So you can then just extract the pricing that you need and put it into your tender.
And a good thing with this reporting, the item I just showed you with the labour plant materials, I used to work in doing contract review with an estimating department at a large construction company here in Christchurch, and the estimator's kind of running joke was, well, it was making money when it left my desk. And nobody knew where they were losing. There was no correlation. There was no feedback. The QS team that would carry out the contract admin and the estimators just did not talk to each other. So really with this, if you're logging the costs, you can say, right, well, actually, we've gone, because this will flag, this will go all red the second I went over on this budget, let's say. And then further to that, if I have entered that level of detail where it's labour plant materials, it'll tell me exactly which one. So I can quickly just go back and say, look, we've gone under on labour, on the amount of labour we've had for the substructure. Might want to look at increasing your allowances or making sure you have everything captured next time. All of a sudden, your tendering is now massively improved. You've improved your accuracy to, you're more competitive because the items you're making too much. I won't say making too much. If you got the job, that was fantastic. But you might be not winning tenders. Why? Well, you might see that traditionally you're making quite a lot in carpentry. Yeah, we're using this on Clearwater, and so is our main building subcontractor. So it's quite interesting that when the more people that use the type of system, because at some points we do need to instruct day work rates and things like that. So having that, I mean, it's brilliant for cost plus, because we've all worked, especially that Hayward project in Dunedin. There was a big system of sign in, sign out electronically, and people weren't following the system. If we're just getting information fed live for people daily from apps, it's just working incredibly well. We know exactly when people are not on site. So yeah, so this is obviously being used on probably about $20 million of projects with us at the moment.
Williams Corporation just started looking into this, and we're talking about pre-BDC and prospect design. It's about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2018.
Credit goes to Owen for all of this, because Owen is the one who's the driving force behind building on technology. And we've actually, Lydia will know this, we took on a student on placement from our we've taken on a few students now, but the last student we took on, Jesse. So Jesse has now got a full-time position with us once he finishes his qualification. Jesse came in with us for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and we sat him down, we put him in front of that 3D software, and he picked it up in 2 days. The basics he picked up very quickly. So you guys are perfectly positioned to actually take this up and bring it to the market, because you'll go to companies that don't have this sort of software, and you'll be able to show them how to do things better.
Our other well, everyone's an ex-student, but Will, that came on board a couple of years ago from ARA, he made the comment the other day that the VDC was too accurate. He's not making mistakes, so he's not winning the jobs. So we're seeing tender analysis come in, and the guy who's just for some strange reason 20 grand lower than everyone else picks it up, and he's like, well, I know I've everything quantified.
Part of the problem with the industry is that we provide that level of backers for our contractors that we're pricing for. And you have some other guy out in the market that's just going, you can't compete against that guy. And that's what we tell our clients is that, listen, look, you need to do your investigation as to what tenders you actually want and who else is tendering against it. Because you'll never win a project against somebody who's putting the finger in the air.
Well, and the thing is, you could spend all day telling the client how well you've done it and how many hours you've spent pricing a job. But again, unless they can see something like that, when they see that.
That's actually a very good point. Like, there's projects that we have priced where we haven't been the most competitive, but we've been right. And the client has seen these and decided that our contractor understood the project better than anybody else and gave it to them. So you're no longer competing necessarily on price, you're competing on your ability to actually deliver the project.
What's your risk profile? Would you be willing to, a client really on something like this, which has $1 million of carpentry, if they're going to spend, I mean, they'll think nothing is spending an extra $20,000 or $30,000 for the next most expensive contractor if they've given them this. And it's their own risk profile, essentially. You know, pay 30 grand now, get someone who you know is going to deliver the job and not run into issues later, which may cost you a lot more than 30,000. Yeah, we'll certainly have.
So a lot of times we provided this model to the client when we're operating as a tendering contractor. And said to them basically, here's communication of our tender. It's not in the model, it's not been priced. So they can go back afterwards with that model and say, you know, if a variation comes in, they can check the model and see if it was in it. Or, you know, if it wasn't, if it's on the architect's drawings and not in our model, that's the contractor's problem. If it's not in the model, not in the architect's drawings, well then it's very easy to communicate.
Do you think that's going to kind of like reduce the cost for estimating some of the tenders as well?
Absolutely. You just see the level of automation that's in the likes of the timber framing, roof measures, all that sort of stuff. So we're right now, we put a fair bit of investment into actually producing this type of software, getting to the point it's at in amongst training. So right now we're telling clients that there's no extra cost of doing it like this. But in reality, over the next couple of years, as this becomes more of an industry-wide practice, there will definitely be a reduction in time cost.
That's just an example where you mentioned where. So this is the High X Holiday Inn in Queenstown, which only just got completed, $60 million project. And yes, it was. And the discussion between Nailers and contractor that we would have done a price for was just this area here above this floor height. So basically roof height. We've allowed for anywhere where there was above the concrete deck, we've allowed for the framing, and that was included in tender price. They believe that everything here should be included. So there was no discussion. Contractor got out the laptop, brought up the model and said, look, it wasn't there, it was never priced. You were given a copy of this at the beginning. This effectively is a list of tags and clarifications.
That's, again, another good point, Owen, is that when we actually produce these models, we can actually drop tags into the model that look like big green arrows. They stand out a mile off. And that model, you got one there. So that could be an assumption. And it could describe in full what, if you click on it, it'll describe in full what that assumption was. And
it could
so
be
no longer
specification.
trying to produce a report with all your assumptions on it, but then the client has to anticipate where and what that affects. You can actually just bring it straight to where that assumption was made, or where you substituted out a material, or where it might have been a design clash.
And if you assumed a different specification, you could click on that and it'll bring you to a website that shows what specification you based an assumption on.
Another use of this is asset management and facilities management. So if you build one of these models for a client and you give it to them, hand them over at the end of the day, what we can do is actually drop those tags, excuse me, on specific pieces of plant, or we can drop it on the roof, and that tag can contain information as to how you maintain that product. Even drop in, we say an internet link and hyperlink back to a web page that has the maintenance manual for that document. It could be linked back to your own server, which has your operational maintenance manuals contained within.
And we can do that actually here as well with the Matterport system.
With the Matterport system as well, you can put on a pair of goggles, with virtual reality goggles, and actually walk through the building.
And these actually, if you have an Oculus. Yeah, that's essentially it. I think we probably covered off everything there.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
Logic are probably trying to lead the charge on this sort of stuff and create a point of difference for ourselves. But a number of these products in here, the likes of Pluspec and Live Costs, were actually positioned ourselves as the people who are selling these things in New Zealand. So if you go into companies next year, we're not just quantity surveyors, we've set up a separate company to actually market and sell these things.
Which hopefully will lead into training as well, because we've put in the extra hours over the last couple of years to figure them out. Because they're not always developed by quantity surveyors, they're developed by other people in construction. And although we've worked out that they work well for us, how those people explain how we should use them might be better coming from a QS. So we think we add value there, and happy to help out with anyone who wants to know more about any of them really, or wants to engage in some form of training.
That's pretty much it, unless anybody has any questions. Yep.
If you're a student and you're going to somewhere that does this, you go through different university assuming you come to that, well, that student's not going to be with you the rest of their working life. Go somewhere else, like is that a student scenario?
Not at all. Again, it goes back to the health of the actual profession. So we're not trying to keep this to ourselves. When we first picked it up, the BBC, we went, oh my God, this creates such a point of difference for our company. We're going to protect this. And after a while, we began to come around to the fact that, first of all, there's an opportunity for us to be the people who actually sell this and train this. The second of all is the health of the industry. So as QS professionals, we can all do things more efficiently. Well, then the QS becomes, again, a very key and important person in the industry. But no, you're going to find this out over the next 2 or 3 years, or the next 2 or 3 years as you go into the market. The QS profession has been severely eroded in the last 20 years as to what we do and how we're even design team meetings. We would have been integral to a design team meeting 20 years ago. We're now kind of on the periphery, but we don't even get invited to every single design team meeting. And in particular, a project that we worked above in on the North Island, we were engaged to do preliminary design budgets, and then nobody came near us. Even though we were engaged to do the developed design and the detailed design, nobody came near us for the rest of the project. Nobody sent us any drawings, nobody sent us anything, even though we were checking in and going, you need us to update these budgets. We never got a response from the project manager or the architects. And then suddenly consent drawings have been submitted, and they send it to us for a cost check. And the building is now $3 million over budget on a $10 million budget. So that's telling you that there's something wrong with the industry where they're not fully engaging with the quantity surveyor. And the reason for it is the cost and time that it takes QS to do things. So we need to find more efficient ways and better ways of doing it, which is going to improve our profession and give us back the control to be able to actually do our job. And that's why we want to push these things out there into the wider market, is because in another 20 years' time, our QS, our profession may not be there, or maybe something completely different. And nobody's doing the cost control, and the industry sees that right now. I mean, you look at the health of the likes of Fletcher's and the money that they're losing. It's because the due diligence isn't being done, schedules of quantities aren't being produced, and contractors are taking huge, huge risks. And they're pricing things at 2 and 3% margin just to get them. It's a vicious circle downwards. In the last couple of years, you've had Arrow, you've had what's it called lately?
Ebert Construction.
Ebert Construction, but they're all huge contractors. They shouldn't be falling over. They should be winning big projects. There should be enough work there for all of them. But there's nobody doing due diligence anymore. And what's happening is architects and engineers aren't designing to the same level that they used to. They're missing detail, and it's accepted. And the reason they're doing that is because their fees are being squeezed. Professional fees are being squeezed right down to do the minimum, because they're now pushing all of the risk to the contractor. And it's been accepted. Contractors have been accepting it, and they've been getting on with it. And you see the industry, it's not in a good condition. And it's because of that due diligence that's gone.
As far as I know, Ireland is like a tech hub in Europe. So this means like back in Ireland, they already using that for a long time, and you guys bring it here, or this
The life cost systems, yeah. It'll be
This-
new.
Yeah, it's relatively new. I think they've been in development in the last 2 years. But this has been backed by the likes of Enterprise Ireland, who are the likes of Callahan Innovation over here, who drive on innovation and provide funding. So this software is winning awards left, right, and centre.
And because it's been developed to integrate with Xero, it can be customized to integrate with any accounting software like Sage, or it can be used without an accounting software, but you will then manually have to pay the invoices, so you lose that efficiency. But really, they've tried to integrate it, and it's an official integrated partner with Xero, and obviously New Zealand, everyone uses Xero, so it's really suited and perfect for New Zealand.
Common that that's to use those kind of things.
The construction industry has always been very slow to take up new software. So look, New Zealand isn't too much different.
And Xero is an excellent product. You know, Xero is brilliant for accounting, but it just doesn't manage the construction side. So you put the two together, and they both do their own thing perfectly and perfectly suited for managing that post-contract financial cost.
Drawings, can that eliminate any arguments or designing issues or solutions for user reports and whatnot? Will that give you all of that?
It will be drawn,
Yeah.
and you'll measure out all the individual fashions and details that are required. But it's not meant as a design document. It's at the end of the day, we're not the designers. That's the architect's job to make sure that the building is weathertight. Whereas, as it happens now, there's the architect washes their hands of it, and there's a new profession called facade engineer. So
So they do all
Yeah.
that stuff,
But-
shadow code and stuff like that.
This is a design software as well. So I think as mentioned before, if an architect was to design a building in it, then it's simply a matter of passing the model to us, where we already have our rates set up to hit takeoff. It's just not widely used probably just yet as an architectural tool. Just another added value was probably we just, because we could, we took all the IFC models from hydraulics, electrical sprinkler system, and brought them in, and pretty much provided the client.
So this is the clash detection we're talking about. If we import the services IFCs over the actual model, we can see if there's any issues of anything in parts clashing with walls, structure beams, and it was on this particular project. It was, and because it's CLT, there's huge cost for the site modification. So that was all picked up again before the project was started.
We spent 9 months working out where all the penetrations were, just like this, for instance. So sprinkler, well, one of these. So these all have to be pre-drilled because it's mass timber, it's LVL, same in the CLT, all have to be pre-drilled. So they spent 9 months coordinating the design team to get this right with the services engineers, the architects and the engineers. We didn't charge for this service. We kind of could just do it anyway. We had a bit of a clash detection look ourselves. And we found several issues ourselves as quantity surveyors, just spending half an hour having a bit of a look around. One really good one we were quite proud of, because cutting CLT on site is a major expense. Everybody was working with 2D drawings. They all have their individual models, but in terms of coordination, they just put everything together as 2D. So I'll just make this a bit easier for myself. Just under the CLT floor on these LVL columns, there's a small little ledge that you won't see anywhere else, and you won't see noted on any drawings, but the engineers had modeled it in. And where it's located is just here, above the service duct. So a CLT floor sits on top of that small LVL ledge that bolts into this LVL beam. What that meant was, as you can see, that those services need to step out about 100 mil. That would have required all the CLT to be cut into a larger void on site. As well as that, the same thing happened over at the side of the apartment where there's a kitchen. So we would have to take 100 mil off a kitchen, which is pre-designed, prefabricated cabinetry. Like this alone, if it was just the ledge and cutting on site, it could have been a $20,000 variation. With the cabinetry, it's not even worth thinking about what would have happened if that got missed, really. So
On this particular project, there was an ECI contractor appointed. As soon as we got the developed design, the client decided to drop the ECI.
throwing a few services in.
Well, before anyone else leaves, I'd like you to all thank Barry and Owen and just have a little gift for you. Thank you very much. Made on premises here. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time and your listening.
We have a LinkedIn page as well. You guys, you're interested, we post about this stuff all the time.
Yep. And a bit of a YouTube channel kicked off as well, just where we'll put up new buildings that we've done. Great.
Oh, technology, eh?
Technology.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, cool.
No worries.
Yeah, it's funny that, you know, I've set on jobs back in the UK where they've had contingency funds. The best part of £500,000 just for drilling holes in concrete, because we don't know where the services go. So, you know, that's given up at the beginning, and we spent every penny of it.